friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Alicia Wrights, writer, reader, and creative chaos enthusiast, also frequent coffee drinker. And today we're going to go over all of my July reads. So July felt like a fever dream of thunderstorms, scribbled story notes, and books that refused to let me sleep. This month's reading pile had it all: haunted houses, morally questionable love interests, found family moments that made me soft, and at least one book that made me cry a couple of times. I even squeezed in a 27-hour 3-in-1 audiobook that turned my mundane errands into a full-on Victorian adventure. Alright, so before we get into these book reviews, let's go over our tier lists. So I'm going to be ranking these books, one on an overarching tier list that is just kind of like a, my overall opinion on the book itself. Then we also have a spicy, saucy Victorian tier list that is to kind of rate any of the books that I've thrown on there for like spicy content. All right, so starting off with our overarching book tier list, we're going to start at the top and go down. So the first category we have is Emotionally Unwell. Thanks for asking. This would be equivalent to a 5-star book. Basically, I'll be journaling about this for the rest of the decade. I loved it that much. Next, we have Delightfully Unhinged. So it's unhinged in the best way. I was emotionally slapped, but I thanked it. And this is equivalent to about a 4-star rating. Next, we have The Tea Was Lukewarm. This would be equivalent to a 3-star rating. There was some tension, no real drama. I wanted gasps. I ended up with polite conversation and a scone. Next, we have A Minor Inconvenience. This is a 2-star rating, so it's not bad enough to hate, but not good enough to care. Next, we have Utter Nonsense, which is equivalent to a 1-star rating. This is a disaster wrapped in metaphors, and I basically read this out of spite. And then we have a bonus tier called An Absolute Menace. And basically this is kind of it was so bad it was good. And the tagline I have for this one is, this book has no business being that chaotic. And yet here I am, breathless and slightly concerned. So that is the overall book rating. Next we'll move into the Victorian ankle content spicy chart. I still don't have a title for this. Feel free to drop in the comments below any potential titles for these two charts. Anyway, working our way down, we have level 1, which is a Lace and Letters, aka Courting by Candlelight. There's no real physical contact. It's purely emotional, longing glances, handwritten letters. It's clean, it's sweet, and softly slow burn. Next, we have A Glimpse of an Ankle. This is kind of the suggestion of something more. Lingering looks, subtle touches, a single scandalous ankle. The tension builds, but everything stays buttoned up. Moving on to level 3, we have A Whisper Behind the Fan, which is aka The Burn Begins. You got stolen kisses, quiet gasps, and hearts pounding. Physicality deepens, but then it fades to black. Next, we have Behind the Parlor Door, which is basically private and intensely physical. So you have intimate scenes that are implied or explored. The doors close, corsets loosen, and tension is finally released. Then you have level 5, which is A Rose Garden After Dark. This is kind of where reputations are ruined, delightfully. So it's open door, fully described intimacy with emotional depth. You have passion, you have multiple scenes with little left to the imagination and language to match. And now we move into, I added an extra level to this, and it's level 6, The Boudoir and Nothing Else. All spice, no plot, but we're fine with that. I added this one for those spicy books that basically are just spice. There's no plot. Right now, I don't have any of those type on my TBR list, but feel free to leave some suggestions in the comments, and I'll add them. All right, so on to the reviews. So, before we begin, obligatory spoiler warning, I will do a high-level overview before going into the more nitty-gritty details of each book. I will include timestamps, so if that book sounds kind of like something that you may want to read and don't want any significant spoilers, you can skip. I will say that the spoilers I include, some are significant to the story, some are just things that I found that I may or may not have liked. So again, timestamps for each book will be when I start to review the book. All right, so let's jump in. Okay, so book 1, The Ghost Hunter Next Door, a Beechwood Harbor ghost mystery book by Danielle Garrett. So this is the definition of a cozy mystery, where we are introduced to Scarlett, who's a florist that recently settled in a small town and can talk to ghosts. Because of this, she gets dragged into a mystery surrounding the renovation of a local house for a reality TV show. There she meets Lucas, and the two work together to solve the mystery before the ghost hurts someone. So overall, I did enjoy this book, and I'm going to be ranking it at delightfully unhinged. It was definitely one that didn't quite grip me as much as I hoped it would. I picked it up and put it down quite a bit over the course of the time frame that I read it. I think this is just because, honestly, it is a very cozy mystery book, and I wanted to be relaxed when I read it. I didn't want to have to worry about other things. And so I primarily read this when I could curl up on the couch. On the spice scale, this is pretty much at a 0 to lace and letters. There are like 2 kind of main love interests, but nothing really happens. So on to the more in-depth review. So I saw this advertised on Instagram, I think, and what drew me in was the talking ghost cat, who frankly did not disappoint with how sassy he was. And this is the first book in an 8-book series that also includes a prequel, and I have not yet read the remaining books in the series. Overall, I did like this book. Setting it up, Scarlett kind of seemed very opposed to all forms of romance and friendship involvement. She's very much kind of she's pretty much kind of a character that seems to be very much a loner. She deals with her ghosts but does not have many friends. A lot of the ghosts are kind of her friends. And she does also stress throughout the entirety of the book how important it is for her secret to be kept. That it can get overwhelming when it can get overwhelming when ghosts know about her powers, because they tend to kind of flock to her. And a lot of people just kind of get weird around her when they find out. So that kind of kicks off my one main complaint, because while she kind of reiterates this over and over throughout the book, anytime she comes up with a situation that she can't come up with a reasonable explanation, she just tells them that she can talk to ghosts. And I personally would have enjoyed if she had come up with some more creative, quips about how she knows things. Or in the opposite direction, if she just kind of was always open about her powers and was kind of this, florist who can talk to ghosts, so, come in and I'll talk to your dead loved one, and you can also pick up some flowers for their grave type of thing going on. I think it would have made more sense with how open she was with everybody else. Again, it's a minor complaint. There are 2 main love interests in this book. One of them seems to be more of a focus than the other one right now, but that could be kind of setting up for a love triangle. I did really enjoy the meet cute between her and Lucas, which is kind of the primary love interest right now, where basically he's a guard and he knocks her over because he thinks she's trespassing. And it literally kind of goes into one of my favorite lines from this book, which is, Are you for real? You tackle me in the dirt, threaten me with 50,000 volts for having the audacity to walk across your turf, and now you want to act like we bumped elbows reaching for the same sugar shaker at Starbucks? I really wish, because that meet cute was very much kind of setting up almost like an enemies to lovers vibe, or rivals to lovers vibe. And I wish that kind of played up a little bit more. You know, you get like 2 more chapters in and they're kind of like Scooby-Doo best pals. So, but again, overall, I did like the book. I do plan on reading the rest in the series. And I'm curious to see where Scarlet goes. So, on to book 2. Well, really books 2 through 5. So this was my audiobook for this month. And I am counting as 1 book, even though technically it was 3 books in 1. And it's the Glass and Steel box set by C.J. Archer. It is a solid 27 hours and 41 minutes for all 3 books. And because of the length, it did take me about 2 weeks of listening at work and on my commute, and kind of when I was doing mindless tasks around the house to be able to finish it. So this is a historical fantasy series with 13 total books. I did really enjoy this series, and I do plan on reading or potentially maybe continuing this on as like my audiobook choice, kind of as they come up on my to be read list. So this is a series about India Steele, a watchmaker's daughter who, down on her luck, turns to an American stranger she met, Matthew Glass. Hired by him to help him find a watchmaker to fix his magical watch, they face countless dangers on the streets of London. So this is where we kind of deviate, because I am going to rank the books separately, even though I kind of gave them 1 overall ranking. Mostly the spice scale is what I am ranking separately. So overall, I count these as delightfully unhinged. The characters were great. I enjoyed the story. I wasn't bored by it. And while I only did the 3 books because that's what came in the box set, I do still plan to finish out the series. Now on to spice level. So this is a slow burn romance, and frankly, I do mean slow. And I'll get to that more kind of a little bit later. But it, for all 3 books, it really didn't go above like a whisper behind the fan spicy level. So, you know, I don't know if it'll go further in the rest of the books. But as I read them, I will let you know. So now on to the more spoilery bits. So this was recommended to me by a friend of mine with the description of Victorian murder mystery meets cowboys. And that frankly was not an inaccurate description, even though the murder part doesn't really start until book 2. So while described as a historical fantasy on Goodreads, I would put this more in like a historical mystery with magic, slash kind of fantasy magical realism. All the characters are very well rounded, and by the 3rd book, I was attached to all of them. And then now we get into kind of the part that maybe it's because I've read way too many spicy books. This is the part that frustrated me the most. So the chemistry between the 2 main characters is like palpable at some points, and it makes it so frustrating to read because I, as the reader, want to like dive into the book, lock them both in a room. That was really, really frustrating. And I'm hoping that they start to ramp up like the spice in the next couple books, because I don't think so. It's a 13 book series, and frankly, I will be kind of disappointed if it's like end of the 13 books and they're finally getting together. Like, I don't know if I'll make it to 13 books. As far as complaints go, that was really it. So definitely recommend this book. So book 6, Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This book was hands down my number 1 pick for my July reads. And it frankly was not even on my TBR at the start of the month. I was doing some research for the current novel I'm writing, and was trying to find some good examples of magical realism that I could read to kind of get a better understanding of kind of how other authors have done this. And this kept popping up in a couple of places. I think Goodreads was one of them where I found this. And the tagline that I read was, a trans boy determined to prove he's a Brujo to his Latinx family summons a ghost who refuses to leave, in Aidan Thomas's paranormal YA debut. And I frankly downloaded it just off of that tagline. I swear I started reading this at about 9 p.m. because I have no self-control or self-preservation skills, and I finished it about 3 a.m. I cannot stress how good this book was, and I really want more people to read this. As a YA novel, and the fact that the main characters are minors, I will only be doing one ranking for this. I'm not ranking this for spice. I'm just ranking this for my overall thoughts and opinions. And with that being said, I have absolutely determined that this book has hit the emotionally unwell thanks for asking, because it made me cry a couple times. Now, I am not ranking this for spice, but if there are parents who are interested in understanding if this is appropriate for teens, the answer is yes. I fully encourage you to read this book, so that way if your children have any questions, you are fully prepared to answer those. But as far as like spicy content, it is absolutely appropriate for a teenage age range. Additionally, I want to add into my non-spoiler reviews that while magical realism and paranormal entities and practices are a large part of this book, because it is a large part of the cultural references that are included within this book, the primary focus is actually around Yad's path to finding acceptance in his community. So, on to the spoilery bits. I absolutely adored how this book was done to be able to grapple with deep topics while also weaving in the magic and the mystery that really did not feel out of place within the story. It didn't feel out of place within the real world setting. This is set in a borough in LA. I think that's what they're called. It doesn't really... LA was mentioned several times in the book. So it's set in LA. So even as a YA novel, and I frankly am no longer the target demographic, I did not feel like this book was too young for me to read. I was able to kind of guess the big twist, who the antagonist was, kind of what was going on pretty early in the book. But there was still enough going on with the story. And then as we got into the ending, actually going on in the ending and the climax, that I still could not put it down. It was still engaging, and it did not deter me from finishing the book, and I still really, really enjoyed this. Okay, so going into the one little part that I just didn't like about this book, and again, this is a very minor part. I know it is pivotal to the plot. I know it is actually pivotal to the character development of the main character, but, and I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, so I apologize in advance. You have Brujos, which are the male ghost fighters, and you have Brujexes, which are the female kind of component of this culture. And basically, the female component can do healing, and the male component actually does the ghost fighting. And so, as Yads was growing up, his mom tried to get him to participate in healing and start to utilize his powers, and it became very apparent that he did not have healing powers. And we see this at a pivotal point in the very beginning of the book where he performs his own rites. Basically, his community has said, no, we're not performing your rites because you're not asking to perform the rites that we have said you should be performing. And so he goes and does it himself with his cousin, and he's granted the powers of a Brujo. And so that kind of confirms that the deity itself views him as a man. And that is the only reason the community accepts him as a Brujo. And I get it. Like, it's a physical manifestation of their deity saying, yep, you guys are wrong. This is who he is. Get your shit together. I just wish his dad and his brother had championed for him prior to them knowing that the deity had granted him those powers. That's all. Like, again, it's a minor complaint. I know it is pivotal to the story. I know it is pivotal to character development. It just hurt my heart. There are so many good parts of this book and so many good quotes. There are two that have kind of stuck with me. One of them is, well, Yadriel was tired of it. He was tired of forgiving. He was tired of fighting to just exist and be himself. He was tired of being the odd one out. And then at the end of the book, so that quote was pretty earlier on, but then at the end of the book, it says, growth isn't a deviation from what we've done before, but a natural progression to honor all those who make this community strong. And while it is absolutely amazing that the community did end up coming together and accepting him, you know, that is still a struggle other people face, and I think those quotes could probably really help others. One of my favorite parts, though, actually had to be at the end, though, where Maritza, who is his cousin, that is basically a sassy queen, is basically cussing out the deity. But we're not seeing this through Yad's eyes. We're actually seeing this through Julian, who just basically got resurrected. And so is like really chaotic thoughts. Like, he's just like, what is going on? I'm so, like, everything is weird. And it was kind of interesting to kind of have a different viewpoint when we sat in one viewpoint basically the entire book. But, you know, at the end, it's a great balance of humor mixed in with how serious the situation is at the end. And I really, really, with my entire heart, encourage you to go read this book. All right, book 7, Potions and Prejudice. It's a Moonflower Witches book 1 by T. Harlow. I frankly have mixed feelings about this book because overall it was good. I went into this with the mindset of that it's a low stakes fantasy of legends and lattes meets the romance of Bridgerton and a Potions and Prejudice, a spicy, cozy fantasy romance with a grumpy, sentient cottage, an anxious miniature dragon, and all the cottagecore vibes. I have not read Legends and Lattes, and this book did give me Bridgerton vibes. But unfortunately, I have to put it in the Tea Was Lukewarm. I wanted to love this book. I wanted it to be the cozy romantasy of my dreams, and unfortunately, it just did not hit that for me. As far as spice, it hit kind of that rose garden after dark, so there was spice. It mostly occurred in the latter half of the book, which is fine. This wasn't enemies to lovers. And now we're gonna get into probably what's going to be a slightly unhinged rant about this book. So it was stated in the blurb that this is a low stakes fantasy. To me, and maybe it's just me, low stakes means like, oh, if I don't get this, it's going to slightly inconvenience my life, but it's not the end of the world, or even the actual end of the world. Like, high stakes to me is like, I'm not gonna say world ending because I think that's kind of its own separate category. But like high stakes to me is like the protagonist's life is drastically altered, or they lose someone they love. This was a high stakes. This was not a low stakes fantasy, but the ending pivoted to a low stakes ending that left me just going like, why? So walking back a minute, because I do have to kind of explain this for anybody else to understand why this is a slightly unhinged rant about this, is that you have the female main character, Elspeth. She lives with her sisters and her mother. They are cursed with no magic by their grandmother, unfortunately, until they get married. Their mother has magic. They travel from place to place, not staying anywhere very long, because if they get caught in the witch's realm without having magic, they will be imprisoned or banished. Like, that is a high stakes thing to overcome. And then you have the male main character, which they meet when they get to this small town. And for him, it would be losing his sister. That is his stakes, losing his sister, who, after losing his parents, is arguably the only good family he has left. And he wants to do right by her. So now that we got that kind of out of the way, the conflicts that they are facing, these two different people, and how they overcome those conflicts to start to fall in love, they progress through the story, is frankly the part I loved about this the most. Like, the high stakes conflict and how the characters were developed with those, how you could feel and see how their conflicts impacted them, the others around them, how they made friends, how they existed in this world, and how they grew as a character was my favorite part of this story, and was done really well up until the ending. Because that's when it pivoted. And the ending basically is there's a head witch. She's really mean. She's not cool. And there's two components to this. Is she's nearing the end of, I guess, her term, where basically she can call the witch trials, or she can be basically deposed through these witch trials. And being deposed is not great, but being deposed, I would consider a low to medium stakes for that antagonist. Like, she's not dying. She's not even going to be banished. Yeah, she'll have some reputational damage, but it's not like she's going to lose everything by, being challenged. And so we end up finding out that she's actually Draven's grandmother and is coming to visit them because Draven has called her, thought it would be the best thing for his sister to go back with its grandmother. It's kind of that woe is me part of the story right before the ending kind of climactic moment. Basically, what ends up happening is she gets there. It is discovered that they don't have magic because one of the sisters trusted somebody they shouldn't. And instead of anything happening, the town bands together and basically intimidates her to go away. Which does not fit that as an antagonist. I have a hard time coming to terms with that this person who throughout the entire book we've been told is follows her rules to the letter, is has set up these really terrible laws, will absolutely banish them or throw them in prison if they are found out, just goes, you guys challenge me to witch trials? Fine, I will leave. I have a hard time coming to terms with that. And I get that this is a multi-book series. The rest of the books are not out. So I don't know if this is going to come back up, or maybe there is a really cool thing that's going to happen in the later books that makes this make sense. But right now it's not making sense. And I know that the thing is, I don't know if there's an overarching plot for this series. For most romantasy books that kind of follow a set of characters as they find their person, they all tend to be pretty much the same, as following the same trope, and not really have an overarching plot that kind of covers all of them, which is fine. That I do not have an issue with. I have read books like that, and that to me they're fantastic. I actually think that this series would have benefited from an overarching plot. I think having her as the main antagonist that kind of follows them around through all their books, and they have to trick her to not finding out that they have magic, would have been a fantastic way to kind of keep all the stories tied together. It might happen, I don't know. But right now, it just the ending kind of felt anticlimactic. I would have much preferred the entire town banding together to trick her into believing that they had magic. That would have made a lot more sense and still fit within the themes of their character growth of finally trusting people and finding their family and finding where they belong, I think a bit more than everyone banding together and going like, we will fight you, kind of. And the witch going, oh no, you will fight me, I must run away. It also would then leave the character the ability to appear in the other books as an antagonist, but now that they've kind of backed down, but they know that everybody does not have magic, I don't feel like it would be as impactful as it could have been. Overall, though, it did have some cute moments. Like, it's still a good read if you don't mind what happens at the end. There was one really awesome line that I plan on embroidering into something that says, if any real men were as good as the ones in my books, maybe I'd be more interested. And that's a wrap on July. So books were read, emotions were shattered, and the tea was on occasion lukewarm. If you've read any Absolute Menaces this month, drop them in the comments below. I live for the chaos. Also, if you have any recommendations for books, for what I should title my rating scales, please let me know. If I get enough responses, I might post a poll on Instagram or Facebook to vote for which one should win. So don't forget to like, sub, and summon the algorithm with a dramatic gasp. I'll be back soon with more unhinged reviews, creative nonsense, and possibly a haunted character or two. Until then, stay hydrated, stay dramatic, and may your next read leave you emotionally unwell in the best way possible. Toodaloo.